it's
Yep.
not easy math to play with.
Right. And I think we're starting to get into the other conversation I wanted to have, and just going through the process of like what it actually takes to take a part from being an idea that somebody comes up with to being the thing that's in the packaging that you can go into a bike shop and buy. Because I think that just having that conversation alone, for the people who listen to all of it, will help them to understand why things cost what they do, and how a frame does make sense that it could cost more money, and how there's certain other parts that it's like, it's crazy that they don't cost way more money just because of the amount of hands that have to go into making them.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I guess this really goes for any part, and some are more complicated. So we'll use something like a pedal, for instance. It's arguably a little bit more of a complicated part, but any part that involves plastic, any forged non-CNC piece of metal, any rubber, is all going to involve a mold. So anyway, you've got your start point for when you're daydreaming on the way to your work or whatever, and you think of a product, or you're out riding and you notice, oh, you know what, my friend that rides this stem I made is having this problem. I need to redesign it. Whatever it is that you're redesigning, you've got your initial drawing.
Yep.
You start out, all of us, no matter who you are, there's that, I don't even know who said it, but there's that old saying that anything good starts on a bar napkin. So
yeah.
Basically, it's just to the point that any idea that you have starts at a very simple proof point. For me, generally, it's my notepad. I just start there. If it starts looking good, then I have to spend, on a pedal, it might be 4 or 5 days, a solid week of drawing one pedal. Sometimes I determine I don't like it.
Yeah.
So then you're drawing it to scale on a flat dimension. From there, you've got to get into AutoCAD. If you don't do, lots of people and some companies will rely on China or Taiwan or vendors in the US to do their CAD work. But realistically, to get it right, you really got to do your CAD work yourself.
Yeah.
So then you're talking about a whole nother level with your CAD work. And then you're talking about a functionality level where at some point you might need that product in SolidWorks, in some form of a 3D program. All my pedals, stems, stuff like that, I have to do in SolidWorks. I need to make sure that a stem fits with every brand's compression cap. A pedal's not going to rub any weird crank angles that might be out there, anything like that. So from there, you've already, on any product, if you're not doing any other work, just to get that SolidWorks and everything ready to start communicating with the factory, so they don't take what you think you're designing and redesign it into a complete mess for you, you've probably got a month at least. So then you send that off to the factory, and they do a bunch of their typing and whatever they do, and look at how much it's going to cost, the material, the time frame. Then you're going to have, in the instance of a pedal, lots of times I'll do an injection, rapid prototype, a plastic version of it. I'll 3D print it real quick to make sure. I'll stand on it, see if the concave feels right.
Right.
9 yards. From there, what I will do is I'll do a CNC version. So it's actually, even if it's going to be plastic, I'll make it out of metal because I need to feel how it really actually rides. I think that's the big difference, and a lot of BMX companies do it where they care and they want to actually ride it and make sure it's right.
Yeah.
That's important. So that's a whole nother, thing. I've got a pedal right now, a race pedal I'm designing that I've been riding for a few months on a few different bikes just to make sure the bearing design stands up in it.
Yeah.
So then by the time you hear back from the factory, they've given you a quote of what it's going to cost and told you your pedal is going to cost $15,000 to $20,000 in mold. It's going to take 120 days, 90 to 120 days to even get the tooling done, to make the mold. Then you've got to wait for them to have the time to make the pedal.
Yeah.
From start until sample time, it used to be sometimes you could get a sample. I mean, I remember sending stem drawings off and getting them in 60 days, just cranking stuff out.
Yeah.
That's not the case. Now you're talking 120, 160 days just on a simple CNC stem sample after you've already signed off on the drawings, talked to them about any issues, you've stress worked it as much as you can. And then on top of that, then you've got to have a rider ride it.
Yeah.
Ride it, but I make sure all of our actual pros ride the products.
Right.
It's
That's
probably,
why they are there.
yeah. If Chad was riding a frame we didn't make at X Games for a reason. He's riding a sample frame that's not going to come out for a year.
Yeah.
It's part of it.
Yep.
So, start to finish, you've got all this work involved. And for a lot of companies, they've got to have somebody that CAD draws it, somebody that puts it in SolidWorks. You've got all this price build up from the initial person that thought of it. Some companies are lucky enough to have people that, can do the CAD work and whatnot, and it helps save on time and cost. But at the end of the day, you've got an absurd amount of time and effort and money built up into this sample.
Yeah, just to get the sample. We're not even talking about making it, or we haven't even got to talking about design of packaging, getting like there's so much more to this.
Just to even get it in, just to even get this sample in the rider's hand, and then you're just finger crossed.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there finger crossed that the rider loves this product, and
especially
there's no problems at all, because you don't want to be the company that comes out with something that's failing right away.
Especially if it's got a mold involved, because you do not want to have to modify that mold.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing, because then, you go modifying it, sometimes you can't. It's just, well, you're screwed.
Make a new mold. Give us 20.
Metal away.
Yep.
But, so then you've got the sample in the house. From there, I would say it's safe to say 95% of BMX companies deal with an agency in Taiwan, or they have a office in Taiwan that acts as an agent for them, that talks between them and the factory to negotiate final pricing, the amount of time it's going to take to make the good, which is going to be your lead time, and then when you plan on shipping that good and packaging. Yeah. So, like for me, once I have a product, I'm like, okay, this sample is good to go. It's ready to go. Rider X rode this. They didn't break it. I'm looking at it. There's no stress fractures. We put it on a machine and tested it. There's no issues. Because you also have to add that into, a lot of people don't realize it. I guess almost circling back around, but there's different ISO testing that legally you have to do on certain products, and on a complete bike there's ISO and CPSC testing.
Wow.
The amount of money I pay annually at Haro to CPSC test a bike is more than I make a year. So
wow.
Think about that. And if I don't do that and anything were to happen, all the way down to one time I had a seat rejected when I was working at Fiend, and we were laughing about it because this is when we first started working on stuff over there. The seat didn't pass because if a kid ate enough of the material the seat was made out of, there was a dye in there and it could harm a kid. So it was down to the fact that a kid might literally eat a seat. So we had to make all new seats. So anyway, you run into those scenarios too, where you're paying out the ass for testing, and again, it's time's money. So anyway, you've got the product, it's ready to go, you've tested it, it works. From there, you've got your final price, you know what you paid for your mold. Most companies will spread their molds out over time. You're not going to make something and pay for your mold on the first run. BMX doesn't consume enough grips, enough pedals to do that with.
Yeah.
So you've got your mold fee, you've got that. So you're sitting there looking at a piece of paper, and you got to look at your percentage points. How much is this item cost? How much can the market, what is currently out on the market that needs to compete with? What should it cost? What would I like it to cost? And then what is the break-even point? So any company will have a point where they deem a product, we're only going to make 3 percentage points on this product. That's not going to pay anybody. That's going to cost us money. It's not worth it.
Yep.
So then you have all that. So you go ahead, you start, entering it in the system. While you're entering in the system, you've got to pay your graphic designer or your industrial designer to sit there and draw the box.
Yep.
Unless you're lucky enough to have somebody that draws packaging, that also does product stuff. So you're paying somebody to draw the box, do the artwork. Sometimes just even doing the artwork, I've never been cheap on artwork. We use people inside. I use people outside of Haro. I use a guy outside of Haro that does artwork for the Olympics.
Wow.
So you can't skimp on these things. You got to pay what they're worth. So I got to pay him. I got to pay person X what they're worth. So this all increases the cost of the good. But I bet you'd be pretty mad if you bought a a $200 fork and it came in a bag that had rust or mildew at the bottom of it. You know, you want to feel like the product's at least deemed worthy of a decent set of packaging restrictions, you know? So anyway, so then you've got everything on order. You work with your agent to put the order in. You're checking with the factory, making sure the lead time's right. You know, then you're also paying somebody to do quality control, especially right now during COVID. I can't go over there.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to. I'd rather do my own quality control. So I had to pay somebody to literally check every part hand by hand for any little scratch, anything, to make sure when it gets to me, I didn't just waste my $20,000 of a container on damaged product. So, you know, you got to realize too, in the whole lead time issue, you've got now lead times have gone back down a little bit, but as much as lead times are back down and capacity is back down, now we're back to the material issue. You still can't get the right block of aluminum for your stem or enough of the rubber for your new tire. So say your lead time, they might say, oh, well, we got capacity, we can make it now. It's like, well, when can you physically deliver it? You might all of a sudden decide this is 6 months to a year. You know, that frame Chad was riding at X Games, that frame's been sitting in my office for 4 months, and it won't come out for another 10 months. You know, it's a 14 to 16 month lead time, and it's not the factory owner's fault, not my fault, certainly not Chad's fault. It's just there's not enough material. There's a shortage right now, and you know, you add the lovely whatever we got going on in Ukraine mess to this, and then all of a sudden you add another, you know, material shortage at times as well.
Yeah, so it's crazy.
You know, it's a lot of work. You want to think, like, I remember being a kid, like drawing products or thinking like, why wouldn't they do this? Like a Dicom Tech 77 level. Like, we always wondered, why is the bolt not on the top? Why do I keep destroying my thumb on this bolt?
Oh yeah.
Well, because he's got $15,000 into that mold. So is it worth changing right away? Arguably he should have, because other people did it and did a great job at redesigning it. But, you know, that's why some of those things, you know, you wonder why certain things don't change. It's because the money's not there to change them at all times.
Yeah, man, there's so many aspects to this. And then